Hello friends, welcome to my channel Smart Literature. I am Saruk Rahman from West Bengal. I am a PhD scholar of English literature in the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. In today's video, I'll try to understand what is literary theory. So I'll deal with what is theory, what are the origins of theory, the background of theory, the differences between literary criticism and literary theory, the nature of theory, which is very crucial to understand, and what are the major theories that we use today. So friends, what is theory? So let us first try to understand a little bit background. So what happened in ancient Greece? There were many festivals, religious festivals or games. So on those occasions, there was a group of representatives from each city-state. So this group was known as Theoria. However, these people did not take part in any of the games or any of the rituals, but they were mainly sacred onlookers. So from this incident, to theorize gets the association of spectatorship. So theory is like looking at things. So now when we talk of theory, theory refers to the professional existence of literary studies. So earlier there was not systematic discipline dedicated to literary studies only. So it was in 1949 when Austin Warren's book, The Theory of Literature, got published. So this book was the first systematic theoretical book on literary studies. Then Northrop Frye, the famous Canadian critic, his book The Anatomy of Criticism, which was published in 1957, it was the most systematic attempt to theorize literature. So Richard Rorty was a famous American philosopher. So he talks about theory. So he did not recognize it theory, what we nowadays call, but he speaks of a new genre that began in the 19th century. It was a mixed genre. So he stated, beginning in the days of Goethe and Macaulay and Carlyle and Emerson. So all these writers were famous, quite famous. Goethe from Germany, Macaulay and Carlyle from Britain, and Emerson from America. So during the time of these big writers, a new kind of writing has developed, which is neither the evaluation of the relative merits of literary productions, nor intellectual history, nor moral philosophy, nor social prophecy, but all of these mingle together in a new genre. So according to Richard Rorty, this literary theory, this new genre was basically a kind of mix from various disciplines like literary studies, intellectual history, moral philosophy, and social prophecy. So now try to understand the origins of theory. So during the 1970s, theory developed, and when it came into being, it was basically a kind of hybrid mix of various disciplines like aesthetics, philosophy, intellectual history, anthropology, linguistics, and psychoanalysis. So 1970s is often known as the high time of theory revolution. So it was as if there was a revolution in the field of theories. So theories were coming after one after another, and during that time, only in that decade, what happened, in the literature department, suddenly it seemed writings outside the department itself from other disciplines became as if more important than literature itself. So they had developed new perspectives and ways of thinking, and there were so many debates and discussion on issues such as human subjectivity, power, concept of responsibility, then gender, class, race, sexuality, mind, construction of history, and what are the disciplinary boundaries, truth, effects, nature of linguistic science, and so on. And interestingly, what happened during the 1970s, that this adjective literary from literary theory was silently removed. So literary theory became theory. So, though literary theory as a modern phenomenon came in the latter half of 20th century, but we see many ideas of modern theories in earlier writers. So, like Plato, he inaugurated the popular approach to literary criticism. What was that? That was the examination of literary text in their cultural, social, political context. So, if you look at the modern theories such as post-colonialism, Marxism, or feminism, they always try to contextualize the literary production in their contemporary society. Then Aristotle also, he anticipates the formalistic approach to literature. So in early 20th century, there were Russian formalism, New criticism, which were basically formalistic approaches. So Aristotle, what he did, he separated literary text from their socio-political context. So we see the same thing in the new critics. They always emphasize the close reading of literary text. So Aristotle, he also analyzed the literary text in aesthetic formalistic terms. So he claimed that literature should be judged by artistic criteria rather than by moral or ideological terms. So he explicitly encouraged the critic to ignore issues of performance and the popular reception of literary work. So you see the last point, if you notice, so we have some theories which are in contrast with this idea of Aristotle. So we have nowadays performance studies and reception studies, reader response theory. Again, if you look at the major critics like S.T. Coleridge, Matthew Arnold, we have so many ideas of literary theories nowadays in them. So how theory was institutionalized in the academia. So in the 1970s, which was the high time of theory was institutionalized. So theory was introduced into academic programs and courses. So nowadays we are having a special paper in our UG or PG on literary theory. So it happened only in the 1970s. Then cultural studies were incorporated. Then interdisciplinary dimension was added also. This approach of interdisciplinarity was upheld by Jonathan Fuller. So Jonathan Fuller was a famous structuralist critic. So what he did, he recommended a kind of collaborative arrangement between literary studies and other departments such as philology, linguistics, anthropology, sociology, psychology, and history. So for the benefit of literature students. So when this interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary thing was happening, so they developed new hybrid fields of study, new disciplines such as cultural studies, women studies, gender studies, post-colonial studies. Then by the 1980s, theory was already institutionally established. And interestingly, again in the 1990s only, we had theory words. So there was much debate about the relevance of theory. So there was anti-theory. Taking for example Harold Bloom, he was not happy with the what was happening in the Department of English, like cultural studies inclusion. So he in a way reacted against the theory in some of his writings, such as School of Resentment and the Western Canon. Then after theory, Terry Eagleton has been writing about after theory, and many other people also. So this theory, sometimes called cultural theory or literary theory or critical theory, and sometimes simply theory. So literary, this adjective was silently removed. So what happened basically that this theory were none of these theories was actually literary in the true sense. So they came out from other disciplines, and when they are applied in literary text, then only we call them literary theory. So these are the names which are variously termed of the same thing. So Russian formalism, basically it was a theory in linguistics. Then Marxism is a political and economic philosophy. Structuralism is linguistics, that post-structuralism coming from the discipline of linguistics also. Deconstruction is a philosophical concept. Then feminism was primarily a political philosophy and a political movement. Then psychoanalytical theory comes from the discipline of psychology. Then post-colonialism or a political and historical philosophy. New historicism came out of historical studies which were applied later in literary studies such as Renaissance studies. Then black studies or African American studies, these are basically race and ethnic studies. Then queer theory or LGBT studies is gender studies. Cultural studies. The new criticism basically was literary in the true sense, which again focused more on poetry. So now let us try to understand the basic differences between criticism and theory. So students often get confused in trying to figure out what are the major differences. So criticism cannot stand without literature. Why? Because its birth took place with the birth of poetry. So in ancient time, when literature came into being, criticism took place only that time. So we have Plato, Aristotle in ancient time also. But theory is a modern phenomenon which came into being in the 20th century only. So it can stand without literature. Now, literary criticism is the study of the concrete works of art. So literary criticism basically focus on individual works of art. But literary theory is the study of the principles of literature. So it actually studies the principles of the works of art, or the categories of literature, its criteria, genres. Then literary criticism tends to emphasize the experience of close reading. So if you remember new critics, they emphasize close reading, text on the page, they emphasize this thing always, and the evaluation of individual works. But theory insists that the assumptions which are underlying the reading practices must be made explicit. And this important thing that theory pointed out, that no reading is ever innocent or objective. So there are always prejudices, preconceived ideas involved in every kind of reading. So literary criticism is interpretive in nature. It tries to interpret works of art, and its basic search is for the meaning of the work that it deals with. But literary theory, on the other hand, is not interpretive in nature. So theory does not look for meaning, but for textual aspects that make the meaning. So again, criticism is disciplinary and institutionalized. So it has its explicit, clear-cut aims and objectives, methodology and evaluative approaches. But theory is anti-disciplinary and interdisciplinary and against any institutionalization. But though we have seen that some of its versions have become actually established practices, some of the theories have become institutionalized. So theory does not have definite aims and objectives like literary criticism. Literary criticism concerns with the discovery of meaning. So theory does not look for discovery of meaning, rather than it looks for the things, the aspects that make the meaning possible. Then traditional criticism, which is sometimes referred to as liberal humanism, considered literature to be out of touch with society and material world. But this assumption of considering literature to be out of touch with the society and material world was questioned by theory. So theory suggests that literature is actually deep-rooted in social concerns and issues. Let's say, for example, feminism. Feminism questions patriarchal worldview that is reflected in literary productions. Then Marxism questions class conflicts and literary productions as the outcome of class conflicts or capitalist system, mode of production. Then queer theory views literature as a reflection of traditionally accepted sexual orientation. So again, traditional criticism is author-centered and modern criticism is text-centered. So criticism believes and relies on some kind of central organizing principle, some foundation, a kind of universal absolute. But theory does the opposite thing. So theory actually denies any kind of center or source. So theory is anti-foundational in nature. Then it does not believe in the authority of the author or accept the coherent and unified notion of the text. So if you remember Rolla Barthes, he actually declares the death of the author. So when the text is produced, so it should not be bound by the interpretation or by the authority of the author only. So the reader has also importance in making the meaning of the text. So theory is anti-foundational and it believes in the role of the reader also. Then criticism disregards the role of the reader in the interpretive process, but theory emphasizes the role of the reader in the reading process. So criticism does not intend to propose any comprehensive theory about language and literature. So criticism basically what it does, it applies certain frameworks of analysis to individual literary works. But theory on the other side, it raises basic questions about language and literature. So it provides certain overarching theories or broad frameworks and offers a set of principles which can be applied to text in general. For example, Northrop Frye, he propounded the theory of archetypal patterns and who looked for these patterns in literary texts. Then Gerard Jenner's theory of the narrative, he looked for his explanation in fiction. So now come to the very important aspect of theory, its nature. So if we actually understand the nature of theory itself, then only we'll be able to understand why there are certain ideas circulating in most of the theories and why are they talking about certain things in a particular way. So what happens, you see, theory or literary theory is not only taught in literature department, but theory has now become wide in other disciplines as well, so such as archaeology, anthropology, history, philosophy, law, sociology, politics, and literary studies. So students in those disciplines are also expected to be familiar with theory. So linguistics was introduced in theory by these thinkers such as Saussure, Jacobson, Genet, Barthes, Derrida, Kristeva, and formalistic approach to literature emphasized style, genre, figures of speech, special use of language. Then there is much debate on politics, ideology, and there were so many theories talking about this issue, such as Lukács, Raymond Williams, Goldman, Althusser. So in theory, there are primarily three key terms which are circulating almost in all of the theories. So first is the literary text. So theory concerns about what does it mean to be literariness. So Russian formalism particularly emphasized the literariness of a literary text, then production of a text, then reception, then interpretation, then culture. Culture, as we understand, a set of practices of higher values. So there is much debate about culture in the theories. Then identity. So there are many identity-based movements such as for LGBT community or feminism, Afro-Americans, working class people. So theory is basically the disputing of common sense. So what theory does, that it attempts to show that what we take for granted as common sense is in fact a kind of construction, a biological construction, a social construction, or historical construction. So why don't we consider this as a construction? Because an idea or belief has come to seem so natural. So it has been in circulation in society for so long a time that we are habituated to consider that as natural, so we don't even see it as a construction. So theory does the thing, whatever we understand as common sense, it always questions and tries to find out the construction, how it came into being. Then theory is interdisciplinary. It is a discourse with effects outside an original discipline. So Derrida was a philosopher. So ironically, Derrida is more popular in literature department than philosophy itself. Then Darwin, he gives his idea of origin of the species in biology, but that was taken up in other fields also. So works which are regarded as theory, so they have always impacts beyond their original field. For example, Michel Foucault have given so many ideas on sex, punishment and madness, and those ideas have become popular and taken up by people in other fields of studies as well. So literary theory is not a series of competing approaches. So students often get confused in trying to figure out the differences between particular theories, and they often get confused why there are overlaps. They don't get it. So theory is basically, it is a series of theoretical movements such as structuralism or deconstruction, Marxism, feminism, neo-historicism. All these theories have a lot in common. So theory is a body of thinking and writing, which limits are exceedingly hard to define. So it seems like theory does not have any limitation. So theory is not a field actually. Theory is a kind of dynamic process, a kind of ongoing debates and arguments which are actually endless. So theory is always open-ended. So there is too much discussion of non-literary matters. So the students who are exposed to theory first time, they don't get why we are debating about so many things which have no relation with literature. So theory is a dynamic process of ongoing debates and arguments about things that we see around. So there is too much debate about general questions whose relation to literature is scarcely evident. Then there is too much reading of difficult psychoanalytical, political, philosophical text. So this much for today only. So in the upcoming videos I'll be dealing with particular theory. So subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon so you don't miss the videos on theory when I upload a new video. Thank you.